welcome back to the AWA 1990 project. I'm your host, Alex G, and with me, as always, is Matt Riley. What's going on tonight, Matt?
Oh, the usual, mayhem and creativity.
I dig that. So, guys, in this episode, we're going to talk about Pro Wrestling USA.
Pro Wrestling USA presents International Championship Wrestling, featuring the top stars of the AWA and the NWA.
We're going to give you kind of the backstory on Pro Wrestling USA. In addition to that, we're going to compare it to what AEW is doing with Impact Wrestling and some of the other promotions they're working with to form an alliance to take down the WWE, and how that never seems to ever really work.
Right.
I guess first and foremost, we have to go through the history of Pro Wrestling USA. Now, Pro Wrestling USA was established in 1984. It was founded by Jerry Jarrett, Jerry Lawler, Vern Gagne, Ole Anderson, and Jim Crockett. These guys combined their rosters and got together to take down the WWF in late 1984, going into 1985. They didn't have the TBS time slot. Vince had taken World Championship Wrestling away, and we see Vince, he's on his big push for WrestleMania. He's doing his shows on MTV, The Brawl That Ended All, The War to Settle the Score. So WWF is hot, and it's cooking, and it's part of pop culture, and it's huge. These territories just they want to band together to promote mainly into the Northeast. Now, they did their TV tapings in their local territories, so we see TV tapings from South Carolina, Memphis, and Minneapolis. And then eventually they did get a quote-unquote pay-per-view, Super Clash 1 in Chicago. And overall, it's just, never a good idea, especially with the people that are involved. For this to work the way it's supposed to, there's a lot of trust that has to go into this. And these promoters did not trust each other. And there's stories about David Crockett's trying to sign, AWA talent in the locker room, and he's trying to get, people for JCP, and JCP is not as hot as it would be in 1986. They're still transitioning from 84 to 85. You see things like their TV doesn't match. So eventually, when Crockett gets on TBS, he still has scenarios where Ric Flair's a babyface on Mid-Atlantic TV, but he's a heel on TBS. So it's weird. Right. Jim Crockett's starting to acquire territories, not necessarily buy them, but starting to acquire Florida and Central States and what have you. So, and he kept his local TV, so his TV was always very much disjointed. Around all the territories that he was trying to acquire. He's probably better off just giving them a generic, national syndicated show versus like trying to keep these local shows. I understand why he did it, because those local shows are so ingrained that if you replace them with a generic show, that people are not going to watch it. So he kept. That's why there were so many championships. We had a question. I think a good friend Darren asked, like, why were there so many championships and Jim Crockett Promotions? It's like they never got rid of any of the belts. They just held them all.
Hey, we belt.
So it's like, you have your Georgia belts, you have your Central States belts, you have your JCP belts, and eventually they do they don't even necessarily unify them. I think the only one that was actually unified was like the TV championship, I think.
Right.
They kind of just, some of these other belts kind of just fade away. The national championship and all that kind of stuff, the National Tag Team Championship, gave way to the United States Tag Team Championship. But
All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, at long last, you've all been waiting for it. Tomorrow night at the Meadowlands, Star Wars 1985, that tremendous $100,000 Tag Team Challenge. 12 of the greatest teams from throughout the world in the ring at one time. And when we're down to only 2, they will go at it one fall to a finish for this gorgeous Star Wars 85 trophy and $100,000. Now, prior to that, 3 world championship bouts. Rick Martel to defend the AWA title against gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. Ric Flair to meet Harley Race for the NWA title. And then the Road Warriors to defend the Tag Team Championship against the King, Jerry Lawler, and his partner, Tommy Wildfire Rich.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for this? On Sunday, February the 24th, in the Byrne Arena in the Meadowlands, you will see the NWA Heavyweight Champion of the World, Nature Boy Ric Flair, as he defends his title against former 7-time Heavyweight Champion Harley Race.
Well, I'm no stranger to any educated wrestling fan anywhere in the world. You're looking at one of the true sports celebrities of all time. I enjoy notoriety in the world of professional sports, second to none. Now, we all know that New York has been starved for a real athlete and for a real man for a long time now. When you're talking about the New York Yankees, they're not getting the job done. The Giants, the Jets, may not even be playing ball next year. So when we talk about professional wrestling in the New York, New Jersey area, you know the people really pay close attention because they are starved for the sight of a real man and a real athlete. So when they know Ric Flair, the world's heavyweight wrestling champion, is coming to town, you can bet excitement's running through their bodies. Now I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be defending the World Heavyweight Championship against Harley Race, who on 7 different occasions have held this title. You people know firsthand, above all else, I might be the best-looking man alive. We all know I wear the most expensive clothes money can buy. I ride in the longest limousines, fly my own jet airplane, but what really sets Ric Flair apart from all the rest is he is the greatest athlete and the greatest wrestling machine alive today. Meadowlands, woo! Byrne Arena, gear up! The world champion, woo! In all his Raven glory, is coming to town in Harley Race. You're going to be mine, Daddy. Woo!
Overall, it's an interesting experiment. Again, it didn't work the way it needed to. I'm always of the opinion is that you don't try to go run New York. What you try to do is keep your promotion and your home territory hot as possible, as hot as possible, so they can't run in your territories. You know, there's the big story where, WWF tried to run Andre and Hogan in like North Carolina, like it drew like 100 people.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it didn't work. So like going into New York is never a good plan for anyone because WWF is so strong in the Northeast, and it's their home promotion. And right off the bat, and going back and watching some of these shows, they really went all in on Bob Backlund on these shows.
Yes,
like he's all over their TV, and not for nothing. This is for New Yorkers and those in the Northeast. This would have been our first kind of experience, our first exposure to Jim Crockett Promotions, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, and that kind of stuff during that time frame. Again, it's pre-TBS, so I don't think we're getting Mid-Atlantic syndicated TV in New York at the time. That's for sure. I think we got UWF eventually, all on WPIX Channel 11, by the way, which was Pro Wrestling USA was on. Yeah, I mean WPIX was essentially a superstation like WGN or TBS, and it ran in a lot of markets. It's a Secaucus. It's a New York channel. So again, it's very the Yankees were on that channel for a long time too. But to me, it's like if I was booking this thing, I think I would have went with Lawler on top of everyone. Just because I think, based on his magazine coverage out of New York and the Andy Kaufman stuff, he's probably the most recognizable person on that show, him, Slaughter, and Backlund. Backlund is weird because they basically claim that he's still the WWF champion.
Right now is the World Heavyweight Wrestling Champion, the one and only Bob Backlund. Bob, welcome once again to Pro Wrestling USA.
Well, it's great to be here, and I want to thank all the people for all their letters. And, I want to explain something to all the people out there, all my friends, because you're all right behind me. I know it. I'm not here because of them taking the belt away from me. There's another reason. I'm here because they wanted me to lower my standards. I set my standards high so your children can have somebody in sports to look up to. and somebody that you can say to your son, listen to that man. That was one of my goals 3 years ago, to be a perfect example. And nobody's going to tell me to lower my standards or to do something that I can't be proud of. Because I've got to live with myself. And all you people know what my motto is, to be a champion within yourself. And I'm not going to be a hypocrite either. I'm not going to go around telling your sons and daughters not to take a pill and sneak around the corner and do it myself. My standards are high, so yours can be a little bit higher. That's the reason I'm here. Because my morals were too high, and my standards were too high.
The champ, Bob Backlund. Now let's go up to the ring for more exciting action.
He never lost it. And he cuts these really ominous, creepy promos.
A gentleman who needs no introduction to the world of professional wrestling. He is the champ, the one and only Bob Backlund. Bob, welcome to our program.
Well, it's great to be on Pro Wrestling today. I've been out of professional wrestling a long, long time, but I've been getting a lot of mail from all you people out there. I know you've been wondering where I've been at. Well, I've been at home thinking about you people. I've been kept out of professional wrestling. I still recognize myself as the champion. Because I wasn't defeated, I wasn't pinned, and I didn't submit. And they no longer wanted me in professional wrestling. And this program right here has brought me back into your living rooms. And it's a great pleasure for me to be with these people. And I'm going to continue doing the things that I've been doing for the last 7 years. And I'm going to try to represent you people and myself as proudly as I can. Because I don't have the belt, but they can't take the title away from me. When I get pinned and when I submit, then they take the title away from me. And I'll say the man was better than I was. Until that happens, I appreciate all your letters saying, Bob Backlund, to us, you're still a champion. And I'm not going to give up. I'll keep fighting. And nobody's going to make me change my ways. Nobody's going to make me lower my standards. Because I'm proud.
There you have it, wrestling fans. Still considered by many as the WWF Wrestling Champion, Bob Backlund.
That's, he basically called Hulk Hogan a drug addict on one of these. It's really weird.
Yeah.
It's kind of bizarre, and he makes not necessarily accusations, but it's like, oh, they're going to try to make me do stuff that I didn't want to do, and I don't know what that means, and I have integrity and that kind of shit. You kind of like, but they were trying to at least have the illusion that they had the AWA, the NWA, and the WWF champion all on the same show, which wasn't necessarily the case.
Right.
Hulk Hogan's so huge at this time too that it's completely ridiculous even to even kind of say that. But I think overall, I mean the shows are not bad. I mean, especially the first set of TV tapings out of the Mid-South Coliseum. You have Lance Russell there on, he's doing the ring announcing, and you got fucking Jack Reynolds.
Yes.
Jack Reynolds on commentary, who butchers everyone's fucking name. He called Jerry Lawler Jimmy Lawler. Like, it's really bad. He got Tony Atlas and Butch Reed confused. He called them Butch Atlas and Tony Reed, and it was a mess. And eventually, I think WWF does steal Jack Reynolds because he's on the first couple episodes of Primetime Wrestling, but he's a shitty announcer. Especially when you have Shivani and you have Lance Russell, Gordon Soley. Like, get one of those guys to be on commentary. Like, we don't need motherfucking Jack Reynolds on this show. Like, he is awful. They try to pair him up with Terry Funk.
I saw that.
Terry Funk on the show. That didn't work, and I think that hurt the overall product. Is just like, why do you have Jack Reynolds out there? Just give me Lance Russell. He's a great fucking announcer. You have fantastic announcers. involved in this project. Why don't you use them? You went with Jack Reynolds instead. That was weird. I never quite understood that. One of the things that they didn't do that hurt the overall project is that not a whole lot of interfederation matches. So you never really got the Rick Martel Ric Flair match. Which is basically you have your Crockett matches, you have your Georgia matches, and you have your Memphis matches, and then you have your AWA matches.
What do you think that was?
No one wanted the job to anybody else.
But you could have had they were fans of doing double DQs and countouts and whatever else.
They didn't even want to do that. They just kept everyone siloed. You get a couple of matches like Backlund is there, so Backlund's not technically with anyone, but I really consider him part of JCP. But he's not really with anyone. I don't think Slaughter is officially AWA at this point yet. You'll see more crossover in Memphis and AWA because they've been working together for a while now. So we do get like a Nick Bockwinkel Dutch Mantel match. You get like the Road Warriors, taking on everybody. I think they were kind of going to, they were trying to go in the direction of having the Road Warriors versus the Lawler and Tommy Rich as something. That never really happened. And like the angles and feuds don't really get over all that much because no one's necessarily all that there. No one's necessarily there. So you get the, there's no brand loyalty here. It's just we're gonna give you the show with a bunch of good wrestlers and we'll see what happens. But there's no sizzle here. There's no stake. There's no conflict in between, the AWA and the NWA. Essentially, and then that I think what hurts the overall process of this. It's just hey, we're going to run New York and we're going to have a bunch of guys on this show. We're going to do these super cards, and if that's what you want to do, you need one guy in control of this. And there's no booker. Everyone's trying to book their own shit. If it was me, I would get in contact with Paul Bosch because that's what Paul Bosch does. Paul Bosch out of Houston, all he did was super shows. So he had one city, he would run Houston. And he didn't give a fuck. He was technically in the NWA, but he didn't give a fuck. He booked Nick Bockwinkel. He'll get Bob Backlund. He'll get Superstar Graham. He'll get Dusty Rhodes. So like if you go back and look at the Houston cards, they're all like these big super cards with everybody. Like Andre's there, Flair's there, like everyone from the WWF. There's guys from NWA. There's guys from AWA. He makes it work. So if it was me, I know Paul Bosch is basically with Bill Watts at this point. Because he's the promoter out of Houston, right. But that's the guy I would have picked to run this thing because he's from New York originally, and he would have at least an idea what the New York market would want, and he was someone that everyone respected enough that they would listen to him, and he would be able to kind of manage all this talent because he does it on his own shows, so he's the guy that this is the guy you want to do the super shows.
Well, what about this though? Why would you not say, okay, maybe we're not going to have Flair versus Martel, but why not put one of Martel's top contenders against Flair, and vice versa? And that way you kind of you do kind of mix it up like, hey, because you can just have them like they're not going to win the title, but you at least give a competitive match.
I don't think anyone knew. I don't think anyone. All right, so this is the first time we're seeing AWA and NWA in New York, essentially, right? The Northeast, Philadelphia, New York, Baltimore. Right? That's where they're primarily running. So we don't know the history and legacy of the NWA. New York hasn't been part of the NWA since the '60s. We get every once in a while we'll get NWA World Champion Harley Race coming or something like that, but it wasn't necessarily a big deal. There's no brand loyalty because we've never seen any of these guys before. A lot of these guys we've never seen before. Like we don't know who Tommy Rich is, and I think that's one of the things that kind of hurt it overall. It was like they probably needed either to establish a scenario, they needed a story, they needed a hook, and if the hook was something like the WWF did with Jericho when Jericho wins both belts, so it wasn't the first undisputed champion wasn't Steve Austin, it wasn't The Rock, it was this third party guy. Essentially, it was Chris Jericho, right? That's probably what the way they should have done it, and it probably should have been Lawler who beat Flair and Martel, and he's the unified champion. But if you do that, it destroys what you're doing in your home promotion. So you have, if you're building towards Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair for Starrcade, you can't have Lawler beat Flair. And if you're building to like a Martel Stan Hansen match, you can't have Lawler beat Martel. So what do? You do nothing, and that's what these shows are. It's like it's a good wrestling show, but there's no hook, there's no story, there's no anything. And if you wanted this to work the way you needed it to work, you have to go all in on this. The pardon the pun. You need to go all in on this, and that's what be sacrificing what you're doing at home to take over New York. And if you weren't willing to go 100%, it's not going to work, and it didn't. And they drew crowds. But now you're splitting. All right, so you do 13,000 in Baltimore. Now I think JCP could do at least half that in Baltimore at the time. AWA maybe a third of that. But now you get to split it between Jarrett, Lawler, Vern, Ole, and Jim Crockett.
Right.
So they're really making money on this, even though they sell out the venue? Probably not. And Vince doesn't care. He's like, well, let them run, dumbasses. Let them run the fucking Meadowlands. I don't really go there anyway all that much. It's not like they got into the Garden either, and that hurts their credibility. Although, not for nothing, I think realistically, to give everyone, New York geography, is that the Meadowlands is technically closer to Madison Square Garden than Nassau Coliseum is to Madison Square Garden. When you go to the Meadowlands, you can see New York. It's that close. You can see the city. It's right there. You can see Manhattan, like, from the Meadowlands. It's literally in the shadow. It's very close to Midtown Manhattan. It's not far at all. But there's a cachet of coming from Madison Square Garden. You know what I mean? And they were never going to get in there. They couldn't even get into Nassau Coliseum, so which has less cachet clearly, but it's still in New York, not technically New Jersey. That's a big thing up here. With the Giants and Jets technically playing in New Jersey, it's a thing with New Yorkers and people from New Jersey anyway. That was the big thing, that they wanted the Yankees to play there, and they weren't going to leave New York. But I think overall, it's a failed experiment, and I won't go through some of the cards here. But before we do that, Matt, what are your thoughts on, first of all, like Bob Backlund's weird stuff, and the show overall?
This particular show, watching Bob's first promo, I was like, ooh, okay. He looked really intense, or possibly coming off a bender. Like, he looked really, like, just exhausted. And the second promo felt like one of those ones where, like, listen, I know I screwed up the first one. Let me go again. I can do it. Okay. Oh my God. It's a good promo. It's very edgy for its time.
He doesn't look at the camera.
No, I always say Bob Backlund was always kind of like, he was a legit face. Like, he was like, a nervous guy. Like, wasn't big on the camera stuff. But yeah, it was I like the promos, but I think by today's standard it'd probably be fitting with, like, someone trying to make a poke. But
it looked like he was going to go heel.
Yeah,
that's what it seemed like. He was going to go heel.
Yeah,
they're like, he's depressed that he lost the belt, and it really hurt him, and it looks like he's about to go heel. And I say this, I would have loved to see the Mr. Bob Backlund character, in 1985 Rock and Wrestling WWF, because I think he would have fit in fucking great. Telling the kids that their summer vacations is canceled, and going after Cyndi Lauper and stuff, and going into the crowd and yelling at little kids and making them, say all 50 states and shit. That's 1985 WWF for sure. The cartoon, right? Mr. Bob Backlund would have worked 100 times better than it did in '94, and I think it worked great in '94 and '95. But I think it would have been 10 times. I think that's what they wanted him to do, and he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to be a heel. Yeah. And then he was, ever since, and Bob's been a heel since 1994 at this point. He's crazy Bob Backlund. And having that old curmudgeon kind of guy who's anti-rock and roll and anti-MTV, fits right into what they're doing. Like, it made no sense for Roddy Piper to hate MTV. You know what I mean? It made, because he's a young guy. You know, what music does he listen to? But having a guy like Backlund in that role instead of Piper would have been amazing. And then, of course, Hogan would have beat him. But, even an interaction between Bruno and Backlund would have drew.
Right.
Like, if you put Bruno versus Backlund as the heel in the Garden, you're selling out the Garden. You can sell it all 3 times.
Yep. And I think, too, you have the right idea. Like, I always remember even back in the day, like, why is Piper so angry at MTV? Like, he should be, like, unless they weren't talking about him, okay, fine. But just having him hate, like, rock and roll music, it would have been better with a Backlund type who made more sense. It could have gave him Piper, like, Piper, Orndorff, and Backlund as a trio instead of Bob Orton or a 4 group, whatever. But
yeah. Because they were 4 at one point, pre David Schultz slapping John Stossel. So they were foursome for a while.
John Stossel.
But even having Backlund and Piper going back and forth and having them both be nuts, that's like Terry Funk and Roddy Piper, putting those 2 together. Like, that's insane to me. Like, that's never been done. It's like, I would have loved to see babyface Piper versus heel Terry Funk in WWF. That would have been dope as hell. It would have been better than that Adonis feud, that's for sure. It's what I would have done. I don't know. When did Funk leave? Funk left after WrestleMania 2. His horse got sick. That's what he told Vince.
Horse got sick.
Oh, my horse got sick, and I have to go home.
Dog.
And then that's when they brought in Jimmy Jack Funk.
Jimmy Jack Funk. Who was that? Art Bar? No.
Jesse Barr. Yeah. Sorry. He legit didn't have an eye either.
Really?
Yeah.
What?
Who ripped out his eye? Because I believe it was it Haku? Did Haku rip out his eye?
For real?
Yeah, for real. I want to look that up. So yeah, Jimmy Jack Funk's got his eye ripped out by Haku. So.
They say why?
Probably drunk at the bar.
Wow.
Jimmy Jack Funk had a legitimate physical altercation with King Tonga, aka Haku, backstage. With Haku tried ripping out the eye of Jimmy Jack. The only thing that saved Barr's eye was that Haku spared seeing as Barr had a wife and kids. The altercation led to Jesse Barr's release from the WWF.
Wow.
Yes, he tried to gouge out his fucking eye. Crazy. So, like, having Backlund as again this curmudgeon type heel in 1985 WWF would have made so much sense, and it would work so much better because we see kind of flashes of it here. And Pro Wrestling USA, these promos are really hard to watch. It looks like they did them all in a row. And for the first couple episodes of Pro Wrestling USA, like, Backlund is the only one that's cutting promos here. Like, they do videos on the Rock and Roll. They do videos on the Fabulous Ones. They did a video on Dusty Rhodes. But no one else is. There's no promos on these shows. So it's just like, it's the Nightmares taking on the Fabulous Ones. And it's like, that's cool, awesome. But there's no stories. And I think that's the downfall of Pro Wrestling USA. Eventually it becomes more AWA orientated, and eventually just becomes an AWA show. But even looking at their house shows are basically formatted like this. It's a JCP card with Backlund on it, and then it's an AWA show with Backlund on it. So, like, they're really all in on Backlund here. Like, Backlund is going to be their guy. So I'll give you, and they did eventually, like, start having, like, these really, really cool shows. Like, there's the Star Wars. They have their Star Wars kind of tag team battle royal thing. They do Flair and Harley Race. They do the Road Warriors versus Baron Von Raschke and Jerry Lawler. Like, those are cool matches, for sure. Even Rage in a Cage. They have the Road Warriors taking on the Russians and Dusty Rhodes and Arn Anderson. Stan Hansen defeats Vader. Tully Blanchard beats Ronnie Garvin. Bockwinkel and Zbyszko in a Texas Death Match. Kurt Hennig and Scott Hall and Boris Zukov and North the Barbarian. King Kong Bundy makes an appearance, Magnum TA and Baron Rashki. So, like, there's a lot of cool shit going on in these shows. The problem is that when you try to go back and try to run it back, knowing that you're only using, like, JCP talent, like, it's not going to draw again.
Yeah.
You know, so, like, you're really kind of hurting yourself. Like, they did do 13,000 in the Baltimore Civic Center with the Road Warriors and the Russians on top, and Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Stan Hansen, Sergeant. Like, this is a hell of a fucking card here, and that's a card that's worthy of 13,000 at the Baltimore, Civic Center here. You know, the fun thing about this is that Baltimore becomes like the big NWA town. Like, there was like a period of time where they did like every Great American Bash from Baltimore because, like, it's, even at their lowest period, like, Baltimore would always draw. And I think it's based on, like, Battlestar 1986 when they got fucking Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, and Stan Hansen, Sergeant Slaughter. So, one of the byproducts of Pro Wrestling USA is that, Baltimore becomes a big NWA town. And, the AWA slowly, literally dies on television, slowly just deteriorates and dies on TV. They have a couple of blips in there. Midnight Rockers were cool. They do some cool stuff. You have the Hennig and Scott Hall, and then you have the Hennig heel turn. So, like, there's still stuff going on, but, by the time you get to, like, 88, 89, like, it's really rough, and then you get into your Team Challenge Series, and then you die. And that's what we're trying to revive the AWA when it comes to, the AWA 1990 project. But, they were so low that, it's going to take millions and millions of dollars to get them back on, even the level they were in 85, not, and millions of more dollars to get them at a WWF or even a WCW level. But when you talk about promotions working together or quote unquote invasion angles, and, these things don't necessarily work out very well. And you can go back and, the UWF and NWA thing that never really got off the ground, even though Jim Crockett bought UWF, but they didn't do anything with it. They tried to do a couple of invasions with Memphis going into the WCW, like in 89 and 90. That didn't really get anywhere and do anything. Hell, Larry Zbyszko makes an appearance on WCW TV with the AWA belt, but no one really gave a fuck. We saw, Smoky Mountain invade WCW and WWF in the same year. We saw ECW invade USWA. That happened. You had McMahon go down to Memphis. So, this is not something that's new to wrestling. I'm not even talking about the Japanese stuff who do this shit all the time and do it much better, by the way. But we, even though the NWO it's a type of invasion angle, but then we had the actual invasion when WWF, quote unquote bought WCW and quote unquote bought ECW, but they didn't really buy it. They bought at a later date. That's why they had to call it the Coalition, the Alliance. I don't fucking know. The Alliance. It was the Alliance because they didn't own the name of ECW. Each of these examples present great moments that happened, but didn't really do anything. Although that invasion pay-per-view was like their biggest drawing pay-per-view for a very long time. And it brings us back to today, where we have AEW, who's working with not only Impact Wrestling, AAA, and to try to get a coalition of promotions together. And Matt, why don't you take us through that a little bit?
Well, what's going on right now is the forbidden door has been kicked open. The forbidden door being the theory or thought process of working with other promotions unexpectedly, keeping that air of never knowing who's going to show up, which is good.
Like the open door policy that they had in the USWA in the 80s?
Kind of. It's more of a case of, like, I'll say this. What we have doing right now is Kenny Omega is going to Impact Wrestling a lot, has been insulting Rich Swann, and kind of, appeared in their pay-per-view. Meanwhile, the Good Brothers, who are the Impact Tag Champs, have been spending every week on AEW Dynamite. So what's going on is I think you're seeing the groundwork starting for multiple championships being collected by Kenny Omega. This is my gut feeling.
In theory.
In theory, yeah. And it eventually leading to him taking on Kota Ibushi and you had that, former tag partners, big showdown, whatever. But I think more importantly, what it's doing is kind of, remember last summer when Cody was the TNT champion and he was taking on like new people every week. And for a while it was like Brian Cage, Ricky Starks, Eddie Kingston, like all these new faces coming in, and they've helped fill out the roster. And in some ways, what they're doing is giving a lifeline to places that might not otherwise have it. Like I know right now the NWA is going through a change, they're getting bought or something's going on with them.
They're restarting with a new pay-per-view.
Okay, so
they took all their videos down off of YouTube though. So I don't know.
I know there was some scandalous type stuff that went on and that got addressed, but I think it's it's a really fun way to watch the shows now because you don't know who's going to show up. Like one example is that there was a tag match, and Kenny's all excited, and Moxie, going at it, and then out of the crowd, somebody jumps up, delivers a go to sleep, and it's Kenta. So that was setting up Kenta versus Moxley, and I think my gut feeling or theory, I guess. My theory is that NJPW was not nearly as everyone thought, like being angry. I think they were in on this. I think it's going to come out that eventually they've had a working kind of hush-hush, nod, wink, and that when this is all ready, we'll unleash this and make this. Because we've talked before about, your AEW. Who are the biggest names out there you can bring in? Like, who are the stars? Like John Cena, The Rock. Well, you're not getting those guys. So what do you do next? So the best thing you can do besides that is create a storyline. Like thinking back to like the Attitude Era, McMahon versus Stone Cold became like bigger than the business in some ways. It was the storyline, and that gave people a reason to watch. That was more than just one particular star. Was there Steve Austin the big star? Sure, but The Rock came along, The Undertaker came along. There were a host of people that came along, stepped up. I think what you're seeing now is potentially that kind of thing happening where they put together a storyline that's intriguing enough that you want to watch.
I do think it's especially good during the pandemic, so you're not burning actual angles that you would need, strong crowd reactions for. Also,
there's a lot of thought, and I thought of this too, that they're quote unquote putting people in the back burner. Like WWE, they've said that Cesaro they're putting on the back burners. They want to have a live crowd. There's certain things that like Adam Page and the Dark Order, they're putting in the back burner because they want to have a live crowd. I get that. I do. I think we're heading back that way eventually. I still have tickets to a show in Boston. It's been postponed now 3 to 10 times, so that's fine. It happens. I
think, will this work? I mean, I guess it goes back to what you defined as working. Is it going to put the WWE out of business? No. Will it hurt the WWE in any shape or form? And will it hurt their revenue in any? No. I think for me, looking at this, it's an interesting angle, and that's it. No more, no less. Just something interesting to do. And it's not necessarily going to revolutionize anything, especially when it comes to like, stuff that we've seen before. We've seen, New Japan Pro Wrestling have impact on their shows, especially Wrestle Kingdom before, and AAA have them on their shows before. So this is not necessarily anything that's groundbreaking. What it is, it's an interesting thing to do. And again, it comes across on something we're going to do something that the WWE won't do.
Right.
Okay. That's interesting. And it's true because the WWF, WWE would not do anything like this. They don't necessarily play well with others historically. That's for sure. But I think, it's something to do for right now to me, like without burning through angles that necessitate a live crowd. Because this angle does not necessitate, like you're hopping from show to show. So like, well, you know what? I might have to watch AAA this weekend, or hey, they're going to be on Ring of Honor. I don't know. Let's see. Let's go watch Ring of Honor and see if they're going to be on Ring of Honor. Or like, oh, we got to check out Impact next week. So something that's it's happening on TV. It's not necessarily something you need a live crowd for.
You know what it feels like to me in a way is, and this is my comic book nerddom, Remember there'd be comic book crossovers? You'd be like,
Yeah.
15 issues. Like, I don't want to buy 15 issues.
Like the Secret Wars.
Like, I get what you're doing, but I don't want to spend $50 when I don't have $50. You know, I will say though, side note, I bought the Marvel Universe or whatever it is app for my phone for the comics.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Sorry, gotta get that out. But that's what I'm making.
Well, my question is, does it in fact have all the issues of Rom the Space Knight on it?
No, it does not, and I'm bitter.
What?
No. You know I'm a big Rom fan.
What about the Transformers UK comic book? Check that out, because they went in a completely different direction with Transformers in the UK. But you know, that being said, I wish them luck. I'm not, and we don't talk much AEW on the show because it's not an AEW show. I don't watch AEW, and people ask me like, "Hey, how come you don't watch AEW?" And it's complicated. It's all 100% me. It's me. It's not. It has nothing to do with their show. It has nothing to do with the people on the roster. I love the people on their roster. I'm a big MJF fan. I'm a big Eddie Kingston fan. And I like Penta, and I like Brian Cage, and there's so many guys on the roster that I do enjoy. I much rather watch a 6-hour Best of Brian Cage comp than watch an actual wrestling television show. That's just me. My issues with AEW are my own, and I don't begrudge anyone for number one liking that show or watching that show regularly. I do have issues with that show, but I've only watched maybe 3 full episodes of it, and like a couple pay-per-views. But it's not something I go out of my way to watch regularly. I don't even watch WWE shows for the same reason. I don't watch wrestling to get angry at it. I don't watch wrestling to be mad at it. If someone paid me money to critique their show, then yeah, I would watch it because someone's paying me to. But other than that, I don't watch entertainment. I don't watch things that are supposed to be entertainment to get angry. It makes no sense. It's ridiculous. My issue with AEW is, I thought, and to me they kind of framed it that way, that it was going to be what I considered a true alternative to WWE. I thought it was going to be Jack Daniels. It was Pepsi. The WWF is Coke. AEW is Pepsi. I wanted Jack Daniels, and I didn't get it. I wanted a more New Japan orientated from a look perspective and a storyline perspective and from a promo perspective show. I didn't. I wanted, quote unquote, kind of sports-based pro wrestling, maybe with more of an influence with MMA. What I got was a better produced Monday Night Raw.
I'll say one thing I like about a couple things I like about it is the more athletic approach with the record keeping, and
I agree, but does it mean anything? Like, there's guys on that thing that are undefeated that don't get title shots. So what's the point of having it?
Oh, those guys suck.
That's what I'm saying. Like, when like so and so has like, I'm 3-4 and I'm getting a title shot versus, hey, I'm fucking 6-1 and I don't get title shots. It kind of makes that kind of pointless. It's window dressing. It doesn't mean anything. And they do have a weak women's division, although it seems to be getting better. But it's still, the WWE's women's division is head and shoulders, ridiculously above AEW. I think even Impact's women's division is probably better. That's what I would use too in terms of like going back and forth. Is kind of have their women go at it, because that's where they need the most help right now. Is their women's division.
Yeah.
That being said, I do follow AEW. I kind of watch I kind of watch it on Twitter, kind of as it goes through, and if someone says, "Hey, Alex, you got to watch this match because it's dope," I'll check it out. But just I don't watch complete shows. It's not something that I enjoy doing, so I'm not going to do that. But that's a me problem. That's why I don't talk about them. I don't necessarily talk about modern wrestling all that much, because modern wrestling makes me very angry, and I don't enjoy it. So instead, I'll watch 10 episodes of Pro Wrestling USA instead, because I like that show much better. And
Right.
I sound like and I listen to the kids because I got kids at my job that they like AEW, they like WWE, they watch both shows, they talk about it, I know someone who like will literally have the Observer podcast on. So I'm at work, I'm like, Dave Meltzer. What am I hearing Dave Meltzer for?
Dave Meltzer.
So it's weird. So there's young people who do enjoy it, and I'm happy for them, right? I don't disparage it. I'm like, oh, you're stupid for watching that show and it sucks. I'm like, no, great, it's awesome. It's not for me, guys. It's not for me, and I'm waiting for that big thing to really pull me in, and we're not there yet. I don't know what that thing is, but I'm not all in yet. Pardon the pun. It's just the way it is. But I do find what they're doing currently with this quote unquote invasion or co-promotion. I do find it interesting, and I hope it works out for them because this is something that doesn't necessarily work in professional wrestling because it hasn't. But it goes to show you that just because it hasn't worked before doesn't mean they're not willing to try it. So I give them credit there. That's for sure. As we pivot, because I do want to talk about what we're booking here for the AWA 1990 project, and as we move forward, we talk about our main event feud again. Well, mostly revolving around Ricky Steamboat, but I want to talk about the Road Warriors. So obviously, if you've been following the program, we're going Bundy Steamboat on top, but we have to do something with Bundy after Steamboat beats him, because Steamboat's going to beat Bundy because it's 1990. Fuck, it's King Kong Bundy and Ricky Steamboat. You can't have lose. So my thought process here again, as I gotta give everyone their reminders here that we have this Diamond Dallas Page as managing King Kong Bundy, Bam Bam Bigelow, and Scott Anthony, Scotty the Body, Scotty Flamingo, whatever you want to call him, Raven. Right? So that's a trio there. That's a group managed by DDP. So I really want to give the Road Warriors something interesting to do here, and I think having the Road Warriors taking on Bam Bam Bigelow and King Kong Bundy as a tag team would be sick. Just because of that. Now, if you ever watched and we've seen it later with the Legion of Doom versus the Natural Disasters, and those matches aren't necessarily all that great, but they're kind of fun. Mm-hmm. But you get a lot, you get Bundy, who's basically at the end of his career. He's not going to be able to do much but be big. But you still have Bam Bam in there, who's a fantastic worker, by the way.
Do much but be big.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what Bundy does. So I think you have Dallas Page in there. His interactions with Paul Ellering. You have Bam Bam Bigelow doing the athletic big man stuff, and then you have hey, let's see if Road Warrior Hall can slam King Kong Bundy. But to heat up that angle, I think we're gonna have to put the Road Warriors on the shelf here, and I think we have to do something like this. So there's an altercation in the ring, right? And you have Wormy, Scott Anthony, right? Mm-hmm. Somehow, one way or another, they throw powder in the Road Warriors' eyes or whatever. But Scott Anthony handcuffs Hawk to the top rope. And then Bundy and Bam Bam go to town on Animal. To the point where, the whole thing is we're going to put Animal on the stretcher because, these two guys injured his back. They hit it with the chair to do multiple splashes, whatever. And then we're going to put, Animal on the shelf here. But I think the way the angle is going to go is that you have Hawk, handcuffed to the top rope, and then you have fucking Scotty Flamingo making fun of Hawk and paint brushing him and slapping him and doing all kinds of shit, and then basically when Scotty's not looking because he's handcuffed to the top rope, but you can move because it's the top rope, right? Because you have the handcuff right there. So Road Warrior gets mad and just clotheslines the shit out of him, right? Clotheslines the shit out of Scotty Flamingo, but then he goes to the turnbuckle, and this is a cool spot. He starts breaking the turnbuckle, he starts ripping at the top turnbuckle until he rips it off, and then he goes after Bundy and Bam Bam as they powder out of the ring.
Nice.
So not only do we have this cool image of Road Warrior Hawk ripping off the turnbuckle, you have the injury to Animal. And then obviously we're going to do like the rehabilitation vignettes, right? Where like, oh, Animal's in a wheelchair and he has to work out and we'll tape up his ribs and shit. You know what I mean?
Are we gonna get him at the speech therapist going, Ricky, say E?
No, but you might get some interesting spots with Animal in a wheelchair getting attacked, which is always fun.
Nice.
But we'll do the thing where like obviously we know that Animal can body slam King Kong Bundy, right? That's a foregone conclusion. But can an injured Animal body slam King Kong Bundy? Is the question. So that's where we put a little we tape up the ribs. The back is hurt, but he's still gonna, there'll be a spot in the match where he gets up Bundy and fucking slams him, and then Road Warrior Hawk comes off with a fucking clothesline, and 1, 2, 3, and they win. But that's where we get the sense of drama in that match. Is we have the Road Warrior Animal injury. This is where we might rebrand them. This is where we might change their look. We might grow out the hair, and we might throw the biker gear on them. This might be the moment here with these two big guys that are just flying around.
Yeah.
It's interesting things to do because you gotta find interesting. You can't do the same old shit over and over again.
Right.
And once, and it's an interesting theory about what do you do with monsters once they're beat. Your big monster heel. They're eventually gonna get beat by Hogan or in this case Steamboat or Dusty Rhodes. Like, what do you do with them afterwards?
Right.
And sometimes they go in the tags, and a lot of times, most of the times, they do like comedy mid-card shit. Happened to Bundy. Bundy's main event in WrestleMania 2. WrestleMania 3, he's in a gimmick 6-man match with 4 midgets in Hillbilly Jim.
Yeah, but he's creating memories for a lifetime.
For the midgets or for Hillbilly Jim?
For the midgets, dropping an elbow on Little Beaver.
That was cool though.
Oh, that's just a fantastic moment.
Bundy was still used fairly well after his defeat. Like he's there for the setup for Andre. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of there. But like what other monsters were used well after like Earthquake? He got put in the tag team with Tugboat. Bundy does the midget stuff. Giant Gonzalez disappears. Kamala disappears. Like they don't really stick around for that much longer. They don't have a lot in terms of longevity there, and that goes to something that I want to talk about in general. I think it's one of the issues with current professional wrestling. It's something that has to be addressed, and it's this guy's being on TV for too long. Like, how long has Randy Orton been on TV? Like 20 years?
Yeah.
17 maybe. It's like just stale as fuck. Like. When it comes to a wrestling promotion like the AWA, unless you're your top guy, unless you're figured in at the top of the card, like I won't be moving guys in and out all the time. Like you're not gonna stay forever. Like a year, maybe 2, and I'll be trying to rotate guys in and out as much as possible, especially when it comes to the mid card and the lower mid card guys. You can't stick around forever. Like we have Taz, and we have the Tasmaniac as a lower mid card guy. I'm not gonna want him to. I'm not gonna want to stick around forever. Like go somewhere else, change your gimmick, learn a new hold. I don't care. Can't be here. Go get yourself over and come back. Because the progression is tough, especially when if you're low on the card, you have to leave. Because they're always gonna see you that way. I can't do much with Vic Steamboat and the Tasmaniac. And
Vic Steamboat. Oh.
That's Tom Brady. You can't do much with these guys.
Tom Brady. Can I tell you, he was a local guy.
Yeah, I know.
He was something special.
He owned a lot of tanning salons, apparently.
I believe that.
Yeah. So like when it comes to guys get mad when people leave the WWE, like they're betraying the WWE. Don't forget that Hulk Hogan's first run was only 8 years. It wasn't that long.
No, it's true.
Guys come and go, and when you bring guys back, you get a huge reaction off of it. Like, remember when Cena came back in that Royal Rumble and the shit fucking exploded?
Yeah.
Like, you have to go away so we can miss you.
Right.
We can bring you back and you can draw money again. But, based on current, the way wrestling business now is like, these guys, especially if you're top of the card, you're signed forever. Like, were you shocked that Big Show left the WWE? I was.
No.
I thought he was a lifer for sure.
No, because well, from what I've heard, is he wanted to do commentary and was told no, and it was like, if you're not going to wrestle, what are we going to do with you?
So was he like? Did he let his contract expire, or I don't even know.
Yeah, it expired back in January.
So, but no one's seen this coming though. It wasn't like people were speculating, like everyone else. Like if AJ Styles' contract expired, everyone was saying he's going to AEW, but
right.
Everyone missed Big Show.
I think Big Show was kind of off the radar because they weren't seeing him as, what are they going to do with him?
Yeah, I mean, he had the sitcom that he was doing. I don't know if they're going to get renewed for a second season or not at this point, because I think it was WWE produced.
Yeah,
Big Show does give some credibility to AEW. I think. I don't know how he is in the ring at this point, but
he looks good. I mean, he's lost a lot of weight. He's got in shape, so that's going for him. But
I mean, this is also the same people that put Sting back on TV too. So
right, and the thing with Sting, I will say this for AEW. My problem with the Sting usage is they're bringing him on every week, and you shouldn't do that. Like, I know it's a ratings thing probably, but I don't think he's moving the needle that much. And I think it'd be better, like you said, you have to go away for us to miss you. If he came on once a month, or if you never knew when Sting was going to show up. I guess like Jake Roberts is doing really, really good like backstage like classes with the kids,
the
younger guys. It's really making a difference for him and for the crew. It's like, let these guys teach. Bring them in, pop them up now and then. They're doing a thing where Sting and Darby Allin are doing a street fight cinematic match. So it's going to be, and again, you're doing it to protect Sting. And the dude took a powerbomb from Brian Cage 2 weeks ago. He did a Stinger Splash this past week. He looks good, but it's like he's 63. Let's be careful.
It's like my dad doing Stinger Splashes. It's ridiculous.
Right.
My dad can barely walk.
Well, you put him through a table, so.
Oh yeah, he wasn't a professional wrestler for like fucking 30 years either. So he's just a normal dude. So I can only imagine.
Sting.
I love the Black Scorpion. You know that.
Sting.
One thing I wanted to bring up, and I don't think I bring this up before when it comes to, guys coming in. Like, what do we do with some of these guys that their contract is expiring, or they're going to become available in 1990 and 1991? And the first name on that list is the Honky Tonk Man. Like, do we bring in Honky? Like, what do you do with a 1990 Honky Tonk Man?
Yeah, I think unless he's going to be a short-term arc guy, I don't think you can build a long-term around him.
But he's so talented, and he is someone that can get tremendous. He drew money. He got heat. I wonder if he'd be up to change his gimmick, though. Like, imagine the Honky Tonk Man, but he came in dressed in like Kurt Cobain or some shit. You know what I mean? Like, is that completely off the fucking like? Because his like he was punk rock Wayne Farris when he started. You know what I mean? So he wasn't always the Honky Tonk Man. And like, what if we do something a little bit different with Honky? I like to see Honky go after Wayne Farris is a fucking heat magnet. Does it have to be the Honky Tonk Man?
Right.
Like, can he be like, a grunge guy, or what about like a fake rapper Honky Tonk Man or something? He dresses like the Beastie Boys. Like, how ridiculous would that be? But I think, and his current Honky Tonk Man Elvis impersonator gimmick, 1990, I don't think it's necessarily going to work for us. Although I would love to bring him in as something else. So I don't think he would want to come in as something else. I think he hasn't changed the Honky Tonk Man gimmick. He still does independence to this day in that gimmick.
I'm sure.
So another guy that comes up for that's available is Terry Taylor, the Red Rooster. And I gotta say this about the Red Rooster: there ain't no fucking way I'm bringing in fucking Terry Taylor. Let him do like a year in WCW, and then bring him in. Like that Red Rooster stink is on him.
Oh yeah,
and I can't put that on the show.
Terrence Taylor.
Like I liked him as Terrence Taylor. I liked him as the tailor-made man. I liked him in the York Foundation. I thought it was really good. I like ponytail fucking asshole Terry Taylor. Like that was cool. But it's 1990, and like you were just the Red Rooster, and I can't put you on TV. There ain't no fucking way. You're a jobber. It's like go do some stuff in WCW. Then 92, 93, we talk again. But ain't no fucking way. And it's sad too, because 1985 Terry Taylor was dope as fuck. Like, and a lot of people talk about the Red Rooster gimmick, but watch the TV back. It doesn't make any sense. So, like, we listen to like Bruce Pritchard's broadcast, or you even listen to Terry Taylor's shoot interview. Like, it doesn't necessarily line up the way it happened on TV. So, all right. So we had Terry Taylor babyface in WWF for a few months, right? He's having matches with Mr. Perfect, right? So they do this thing where, Bobby the Brain Heenan is such a great manager that he's going to take this guy with limited skill and limited size, and he's going to make them into the next WWF champion or the next top guy. The guy he picks is Terry Taylor. But throughout this entire process, Terry Taylor does not turn heel. He's with Heenan, and Heenan is his manager and is in the Heenan family. But he's not a heel the entire time. So this thought process that Terry Taylor didn't embrace the gimmick as the Red Rooster is not true. There was no gimmick there. He was someone that Keenan put the Red Rooster gimmick on him to embarrass him, but there was never he didn't on TV. He was never a heel, and if he would have been a heel, it would have made more sense. But he was with Heenan. He was never a heel. Heenan gets frustrated because he's not heel enough for him, slaps the shit out of him. Brawler beats him up, and then they go off and they do the match with Heenan. And then he does like the dye with his hair to make it look like a rooster, and he has the Rooster Booster after that as a babyface. But there's no scenario where the Red Rooster was ever a heel. So I don't know if it was aborted before then or not. But Terry Taylor says I didn't embrace the gimmick, so that's why I failed at it. And then Bruce Pritchard kind of says the same thing. But I was like, what's there to embrace? I mean, that's the angle. Unless they had something else in mind, and Terry was like, I'm not going to do it, and this is what we got. But the angle itself is that the Red Rooster was never a heel. He was trying to become a better wrestler, and he went with Heenan. But like if you watch Red Rooster matches, it's not like he's cheating in those matches or doing anything. That's the heat, because he's not doing anything, and Bobby's getting mad. So we stay away from Terry Taylor at least for a while. Another guy who comes up for expiration is Rugged Ronnie Garvin. Now, Garvin is the guy I think I would bring in. Just to punch Steve Austin in the face a couple times. On TV, he wasn't necessarily destroyed, and he's still familiar with the AWA crowd, former NWA World Champion. It wasn't like he was beat to dust on WWF TV. The only thing that's bad about Garvin that he's like in these jobber tag team matches, but he's not the jobber. So it'd be like, Rhythm and Blues versus Ronnie Garvin and Dwayne Gill, and then Dwayne Gill gets beat.
Right.
But it's not like Garvin's getting beat. So I think Garvin is the guy that I probably would bring in. So what are your thoughts on Ronnie Garvin?
I'm not a big fan of Ronnie Garvin.
You love Ronnie Garvin. You love the Garvin stomp. You're just mad that he beat Flair for the belt.
I was, but that's because I was a Jimmy Garvin guy. But hashtag give Jimmy Garvin the belt. Ronnie Garvin I was never a fan of his, and
you like the rat tail that he used
I will say this. I will say this. He's a better heel than a face.
Okay.
And I think I'm not saying me not being a fan of him doesn't mean he's not a good worker or can't be a viable member for the team. I could see him coming in and providing like a good heel. Because I think one of the things that people miss out on sometimes is it's good to have like tier talent, so like, okay, your first tier guys beat each other, they can't beat tier 2. Your tier 2 guys can beat tier 1 and each other on tier 2, but they can't beat tier 3. And he could be a guy that could be a tier 2 guy who you have to beat on the way up the ladder, like you got to get by, it's like, what was it, Glass Joe and to beat Deep Honda or all those guys, confusing my games now, but that's me.
Well, I think there has to be different levels. So like there have to be, your lower mid card, your mid card, your upper mid card, your main event, right? And your lower mid cards is not going to be competitive with your main event guys. I mean that's the way it works. Like Coco Beware and Randy Savage could have a hell of a match, but on WWF TV, Savage is beating the shit out of him.
Right.
But Coco is a fantastic worker.
I will say, I think one of the things that's lost sometimes, and you'll see it on AEW, is like you'll see Cody versus Peter Avalon.
You give them too much?
Oh, and they'll engage them like it's like they're making a competitive match, and they had times where Cody was not paying attention, was like they were setting up that he wasn't taking him seriously.
Right.
And he hurt his shoulder during the match, or was the start of the shoulder injury. I think they're going to sell it to have him take time off of the baby. But it's. I believe Bret Hart would do this sometimes. Bret Hart would work with a guy and give him 3 or 4 moves, and then he'd like wake up and put. And it's sort of like when you see a professional pitcher and he gives a guy a few pitches and he takes him out yard. The next time he faces him, he strikes out in 4 pitches, or 3 pitches, boom, boom, boom. Or a football player like Tom Brady for the longest time, like some cornerback would get him, and then he'd go back and like trying to burn him for a touchdown, and just like okay. So I don't think it's a bad idea to have your talent show flares. Because the thing I think is missing, like one of the elements that never really is in wrestling, is the element of the any given Sunday. Like that sometimes a guy just hits the right move. There's a move that Orange Cassidy does, the mouse snare, I think it is, mousetrap.
Yeah.
And it's a phenomenal lock up, and it looks cool. And it's like have someone like, oh, I trained with him, I learned this new move, and like make it a thing, like, oh, your new move, yeah, you're gonna see it's gonna work, and then have him pull off a victory, like, holy shit, you beat Cody or you beat whoever, and
like when Barry Horowitz beat Chris Candido on TV.
That really happened.
It did.
Oh, Chris Candido.
Fantastic. I think last but not least, I don't know if we talked about this before, but in early 1991, Dusty Rhodes' contract comes up. What do you do with Dusty? Do you bring Dusty in?
You bring Dusty in.
You have to, right?
You gotta, and you
at least gotta try. You make him the booker, though?
What's that?
You make him the booker?
No. You bring him in. Well, you're the booker. You bring him in, and you have him do the either, I would say, the babyface version of Terry Funk's run against Flair.
Okay.
Where Rick, how about a title match? Oh, Terry, and then he pile drives him.
Yeah.
But Dusty be like, how about a title match? And have the champ be like, you're fat and old. You never do it. Tell you what, you beat this guy, I'll give you a match. And Dusty goes out and beats that guy. And he's like, well, that's pretty good, but he's not really a big talent. Why don't you go beat this guy? And have it be a thing where every few weeks he's giving him somebody new to face, and he keeps winning. And then he gets a title shot, and then you get the fans behind Dusty. And you don't put the belt on him unless you want to make a memory win, but it's a way to build up momentum that isn't there previously. And you're not going to just walk him in, and be like, here's a belt, Dust.
I mean, it's Dusty. You might do it anyway. you take Dustin along with them too, right? Because they both come. I don't necessarily think they're a package, but if Dusty's available, then Dustin's available.
Yeah.
But you might get Dustin Rhodes out of the deal too. So it might be like, hey, listen, you might you sign Dusty, but you get Dustin too as kind of like a bonus. And maybe he does work behind the scenes instead, because he didn't wrestle again. He goes back to WCW and he becomes the booker, and he does stuff behind the scenes. I think he has like another match at he does the War Games with Dustin and the Nasty Boys versus Colonel Polka and his men. But that's it. And Dusty's done. So I don't know if Dusty wants to wrestle anymore either. So that's what you got to figure out. It's like, oh, Dusty, you want to wrestle? Again, it does go back to our theme that we've been doing of homecoming, bringing everyone back home because
Right.
Dusty was in the AWA early in his career with Dick Murdoch and as the Texas Outlaws. So you're bringing him back home.
I always think of that kind of booking is I mean, I know you've seen Avengers.
Yeah.
And there's a line where Captain America's talking to Coulson, and he's like, well, that seems a little old-fashioned. And he's like, oh, people might just want a little old-fashioned right now, Yeah. And it's like, some of the wrestling is like, it's okay to have an old throwback type match, Go to old school, give them what send the fans home happy type thing. Give them a feel-good story. And I think if you had Dusty doing that kind of angle where he's not
one last ride, doing the Rocky Balboa at the end,
and you can have the heel champion be running his mouth, and it doesn't have to be your world champion either. It could be like a secondary champion. It could be but a guy who's like, Dusty, I'm a big fan, and Dusty be like, well, I would have beat you in your prime. Oh, really? You beat me right now, and then you set that up so he can be feuding with somebody else, but in the back of his mind, he's got Dusty showing up. Just saying.
Yeah, man. Could be done. So again, Dusty Rhodes' contract I think expires December of 1990. He does the match with DiBiase and Virgil with him and Dustin, not under contract by the WWF because he already gave his notice to go to WCW, and I think his first big appearance was Wrestle War. I think is when he comes back, the one in Arizona. He's definitely there for Super Pro as the commentator, but there was rumors that he was going around the locker room trying to get people like, oh, I'm going back to WCW, baby. I'm going back to TBS. I'll get you a contract. And then he didn't call anybody.
Yeah.
That was what was said. So I don't know. But yeah, Dusty Rhodes, viable. I think he's very viable. I think Ronnie Garvin's viable. I don't know what we're going to do with the Honky Tonk Man, and we're not touching Terry Taylor. So at least for another year. All right, guys, so we are officially out of time. So for Matt Riley, I'm Alex G. Have a good night.